Hey everybody, welcome to Thursday and to Breakfast Club. Thanks so much for being here today. We are welcoming back perennial fan favorite and host favorite, Moe Flannery, Senior Collections Manager for our Ornithology and Mammalogy collections. Hey Moe.
Hey there, great to be here.
Yeah, and we're excited to be actually specifically there in the location you are today. This is something that we have actually tried to make happen for a while, and took us a little bit of rearranging, but can you tell us what we're gonna see today?
Yeah, today we're in what I call the antler room, what the entomologists call the weevil room, because it's a shared room. We also refer to it as our oversized collection room because it's not just antlered material, it's also large whales and large specimens that we can't fit anywhere else in the museum.
Okay, excellent. And this is like a space that people very rarely get to see, so I feel extra lucky today.
This is one space, I think, that the Platinum Tours, at least when we were open before, the Platinum Tours did come into this space.
Okay, good.
So if you paid money, you could come in, but now you're all getting it for free on YouTube. But
Moe and I are here to democratize this. Yeah,
exactly. Here you go, everyone.
Yeah.
They probably tell different stories than I'll tell as a collections manager. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And your depth of knowledge is, this is a next level type of collections tour. So yeah, let's dive in. How do you want to get started?
All right. So I'll just start with what's behind me. So on the rack behind me are horn specimens. So these are mostly trophy specimens with skulls attached to the horns. And then it leads into antlered specimens. And before we get started, I'll explain the difference between horns and antlers, because I'm sure that's going to come up. So antlers are bony material that grows out of the skull of the animal, mostly deer, and are shed every year. And they're used primarily to help choose a mate. So the male will grow large antlers so that the female then chooses the male with the best antlers. Horns, however, are a bony core covered with a keratin sheath, and I'm gonna show you one up close over here. So
okay. Let me add the Oki
camera. Yeah, I have the little camera.
There you go.
And I need to be able to see what I'm looking at so I don't show you, make y'all sick. So this is a kudu specimen, and I am going to take the bony sheath off of here. Can you still see that? So you can see the bone core underneath the keratin sheath is what I took off of the bony core. And that is actually, this is a cut surface. So when this specimen was prepared, somebody cut off the bone so that the sheath could easily go on and off. So that is what horns look like on the inside. All right, you stay there. Right,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll throw in here too that no matter what platform you're watching on, you can ask Moe questions anytime. Just leave them in the comments or chat section and we'll pass them on.
So I'm gonna move my little setup here. If you want to switch back to me, there
you go.
Keep people from getting nauseous. So when we moved into the museum in 2008, we didn't have enough room for our big specimens, and so the entomology collection said, "Oh, we have this weird room downstairs where the elevator shaft is. You may hear the elevator shaft making some noise." Get this thing out of the way.
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky, there are people upstairs because the museum is open now, which is exciting. So they said, well, why don't you guys take part of our room downstairs? And we said, sure. We took 3/4 of their room, and they have their weevils over in the corner. But, their weevils are teeny, teeny, tiny. You'll have to get them in for a tour. So we hung up the horned and antler specimens on these racks to make it easier for researchers to access them. Now, it's not really that easy because, as you can see, to get into the aisle, you have to it's a little tight in here. but that's only because we have so many specimens. So the horned specimens are on my left here, and the antlered specimens are on the right. So it's all organized by taxonomic order. So all the African antelope are in their taxonomic order, and then we get into the deer here. And then we have big caribou and things next to those. And over here, I'm going to show you one special deer. Okay, let's get this little camera out. This specimen always comes out for Halloween. This is what we call our tumor deer. So this is just a regular black-tailed deer that actually had some sort of endocrine disorder.
Wow.
That caused it to grow that huge tumor on its face, and it caused its antlers to grow all these extra layers.
Oh,
and
wow.
so it probably did not shed its antlers each year. It probably just continued to grow, which is why they're all spiky like that. And because the tumor is there, we know that it lived like this for a while.
Right,
So
right.
you can imagine it was probably really difficult because where's the guy's eye? His eye is right here. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they do see out of the sides of their heads anyway, but that one eye would still be obstructed by that tumor there. And while we're in this area, let's keep going this way. So we do have some trophy mounts. This is an eland. So these are primarily historical mounts that have been in the collection for many, many years. They're called shoulder mounts. They're, animals that have been hunted and then mounted over a form. So it's the skin over the form. We don't typically, this is a nicer looking one up here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't typically display those because, it's kind of disconcerting to see half of an animal coming out of a wall. And so we keep them in the collection as representatives of the species and of what the species look like. And researchers can get DNA from things like the horns and antlers on them too. And this is one of my other favorites. This is a little gorilla skeleton that we have in the collection holding onto this branch here in the corner. I don't really know the history of this. If you look in our catalog, which is available online, this little guy, this is a young gorilla, so it's a juvenile. It is a lowland gorilla from equatorial Africa, but it was cataloged in our collection in 1938, and that's all that we know. We don't have any information about where it came from prior to that. Maybe it was on display somewhere or in a private collection. A lot of strange things like this, especially like mounted heads and things, come from private collections.
Mm-hmm. And Mo, what would determine whether or not the Academy actually found one of the mounted heads, for example, valuable enough to take in?
It would be if we don't have a representative of that species. Really, nowadays, we wouldn't bring anything in unless it was incredibly rare that we don't have it. And if it has information along with it, I'll show you some other specimens. We do often get things that are confiscated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And that is, sometimes we take them because we don't have them in the collection. And then other times we take them because it's a good place for them to be stored instead of being destroyed or something like that.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to put the camera down for a second and roll these racks so that I can show you some other cool things.
Excellent. And I'll just say, so there's a Miss Amador's class is watching, and they've just asked if you have ever seen a dinosaur. And I was going to reiterate for anyone who missed the beginning of this episode that we are currently in the, Mo is the curator of Ornithology and Mammalogy, which means birds and mammals. So dinosaurs are an entirely different department.
Yes, and the only dinosaur I've ever seen is the cast of the Tyrannosaurus Rex on display here. I guess I've seen other dinosaur casts in other museums, but I have never actually seen dinosaur bones in the ground or anything like that.
Okay, good question though from the classroom.
Yeah. All right, keep them coming. All right, so we had to fit. Whoops.
What's going on over
there? I just went a little bit too far, and one of the elk antlers got a little mad and got stuck. So over here, over in this row, we have a place that we can store our whale bones. So hanging on this rack are ribs. These are ribs from blue whales. This is blue whale. This is also blue whale. This one down on the bottom, this really big, here's the back of it. And the front is way over there. That's a humpback whale jawbone.
Wow.
The lower jaw. And then deep inside there, we have a couple of other little tiny jawbones and then some very special tusks that I had brought one out here a little closer so that you guys can see it. So this here, I'm going to stand it right next to me so you can see the comparison. Wow, that camera is very bright.
We can definitely see the height there or the length there.
Yeah, you can see. Except you can't. There you go. Put it in
front of you. Just a little. There you go.
There, in front of my face. Wow, it's just up to my nose. So this is a tusk. Let me get it in a different position so you can maybe see the lighting. There we go.
We can
see
you
kind of see the like swirling pattern.
Mm-hmm.
God, this is like watching on a screen and using two hands.
And everything's reversed. Yep.
And everything's moving. This is a narwhal tusk. So narwhals are marine mammals in the cetacean family that are found in the Arctic. And they typically have, oops, now I'm having an issue. There's the bottom of the tusk. So this is what fits into the narwhal's face. And then this long tusk sticks out in front of the narwhal. And they have two teeth generally that grow, but only one of them gets very, very long. And as you can see, this one is about, 5 feet long, 5 feet 4 inches long or something like that. And so they don't fish with them because if you speared a fish on the front of your tusk that was 5 feet away from your mouth, how would you get it into your mouth? So they actually, researchers still don't know exactly what narwhals do with the tusk. There was some drone footage recently that they were able to get, and they saw that the narwhals were in a school of fish and were swinging their tusk back and forth, like stunning the fish.
Oh, wow. And
then sucking them into their mouth. So they're suction feeders. They just suck the fish in generally. And there's also some question, right, that these might be for sexual selection. So I talked about how the deer grow the big antlers to attract a female. It could be that the narwhal tusk is also part of sexual selection.
Right. Okay.
So things that we still have to learn.
It's a really big mystery. Like also literally, it's pretty awesome. Ayush asked, and this is a good clarification, is that one a horn or a tooth?
It is a tooth. Yep. So that is a tooth that grows out of the narwhal's mouth. Just like, I'm going to move while I talk to you.
Okay.
Just like elephant tusks. They are
Right.
the canine teeth of elephants, and a narwhal tusk is the canine tooth. They do have two, but one is kind of stunted. and so it doesn't grow long. Although there have been some instances where people have found narwhals with 2 long tusks, like twinsies. Yeah, but that's pretty rare.
Wow.
And we certainly don't have that in the collection. So we're now going to the other side of the room. We're going to stop right here. So we have some whale specimens on this side.
And Mo, a quick question from the audience. So what happens after scientists find a bone? Like, what are the steps to actually identifying it and then caring for it?
So after usually the whole animal is found first, and then you collect the bones from the animal if you're in the field. So like, say this harbor porpoise here behind me, this harbor porpoise washed up on the beach. Hold on, let me see. Ocean Beach, I believe. San Francisco Ocean Beach in 1989, July 24th, 1989. And one of my friends, Mark Weber, was here at the time, and he went out with another person. They brought the whole carcass in, and now we try and do a necropsy, which is basically an autopsy. Autopsy is the word for when you open up a human being to try and figure out what they died from. In an animal, it's called a necropsy. So you open up the animal and you're looking for broken bones or signs of disease or something to tell you why it might have died. And so you would open up the harbor porpoise, try and figure out why it died, and then we just take all the muscle off of the bones and we clean them. And we have several ways that we clean them. We have a domestic beetle colony, which maybe that can be another breakfast club at some other point. A stinky breakfast club.
Flesh-eating beetle breakfast club.
Yeah, right now the flesh-eating beetles are on a little bit of a pandemic break. They're still eating, but they're not working as hard as when we're here full time. We keep them working all the time. Now they're kind of a little more leisurely with their food. But some bones go through the domestic beetles. So the skull of this harbor porpoise would be cleaned by the beetles because we don't want the teeth to fall out. So the beetles are very good about keeping things together. But the rest of the skeleton, the rest of the bones would just go in a bucket of warm water, and the bacteria in the water degrade the muscle off. And that's what gives you clean bones. We do a couple of other treatments if they're super greasy, which cetaceans are typically very greasy. We might have to soak them in ammonia to pull some of that, or salt water to pull some of that grease out. Or we might use a little bit of what's called sodium perborate, which is kind of a strong hydrogen peroxide, just to whiten the bones just a little bit so that they look better for display. But most of our specimens are actually research specimens that aren't on display. This room is a little weird because it's not the typical whole animal in a box. We have all that upstairs. And we did a breakfast club up there, so you can see, maybe I showed a whole theater in a box or something. But this one actually was on display. This is our harbor porpoise puzzle. And the pieces of the harbor porpoise come apart so that our public programs team, I love showing this part. This is the tip of the tail.
Oh, wow.
To me, it looks a lot like a rattlesnake's tail.
Yeah.
But those are the tiny, tiny bones at the end of the harbor porpoise's tail. So when you see a harbor porpoise with their flukes, those flukes, that's all tissue material. It's hard tissue. It's cartilage. But that's what they use to move. But there's no bone actually making up the flukes. The flukes, if you can imagine this tail, put the pelvic bones down. This tail sits here, and then the flukes come out of the tail like that, and that's what they use to swim. So this is our puzzle.
That's
and you
neat.
Can see the puzzle gets to hang out with a couple of mountain animals.
And Mo, Martin has a tough question for you. They'd like to know what your favorite specimen in the collection is.
Oh gosh. Well, my favorite specimen in the collection is, it's an orca skeleton that is on display up on the main floor. It's called 0319 because that was its number when it was alive. It was part of an identified team. But it's my favorite specimen because it's stranded on Thanksgiving in 2011. And we hiked 5 times up and down these steep cliffs to get every single bone off of the beach. And then we cleaned it for years. And then we put it together as a display for the public during our Built for Speed exhibit. There might even be a video somewhere online of us putting it together. And then now it's on permanent display in the museum. And it's a beautiful specimen. And plus,
it really is.
When you put that much work in on something, it becomes your favorite. It's like my baby upstairs. So speaking of orcas, let's look at some orcas over here.
You're such a pro with this rolly cart.
My little rolly cart.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So these are some of our orca skulls. Now the skull is upside down, just so that you get your bearings. If you put your finger in your mouth, if it's clean, and touch the roof of your mouth, I'm touching the roof of the mouth of this orca. So it's hard to store them the other way because the bone is fragile here and can break off and stuff. So this orca is another special orca. This one is from 1977 from Point Reyes National Seashore. And you can see something really cool about this specimen. See how its teeth, missing some teeth, but are very worn down. They're almost like polished and flat. This is what they're supposed to look like. Orca teeth are very pointy and sharp, typically. So this specimen is also from the 1970s. This one was captured off of Washington. This is the lower jaw, and then this is the cranium. There's the roof of the mouth. This one was captured in 1968 from Washington, and it was actually brought in alive to Hawaii for the Naval Undersea Research Program. Sometime, I don't know if they use orcas anymore. I think they still use sea lions and bottlenose dolphins, but I'm not sure that they use orcas for Navy research anymore. But orcas are very smart, and they were using them to find bombs and things in the bottom of the ocean.
Wow.
This one only lived in the Naval Sea Research Program for 3 years, and then when it died, we made arrangements to bring it here. So that's a great example of an orca from Washington State, which means that it is a resident orca, which means that it feeds primarily on salmon. So this is one ecotype. Residents are one ecotype of orcas. Now going back to our Point Reyes animal with the worn down teeth. At first, for many, many years, we thought this was just an old lady orca. And her teeth had gotten worn down over the years, and her other members of her pod had to feed her and stuff. But then when 0319 washed up in 2011, we started rethinking this orca. So 0319 was not an old animal at all. He was only about 12 years old because they knew who he was in real life, or in life when he was alive. And he also had very worn down teeth. So he was not even sexually mature, and he had worn down teeth. And what researchers had discovered right around that same time in 2011 is that offshore ecotype orcas, which is what 0319 is, confirmed genetically, and what we suspect this orca is, feed primarily on sharks. And they learned that because they were following orcas. And the orcas pooped, they grabbed the poop, and they did the PCR DNA analysis of the poop, and they found sleeper shark DNA in the orca poop. And so these offshore orcas with the really worn down teeth are getting those worn down teeth from eating sharks, which have skin like sandpaper.
Right.
It's called dermal denticles on the skin. And so that wears down their teeth. But then as a scientist, you ask the question like, well, how does that make sense for the species? Because look, you can even see there's like a big cavity here, and 0319, even though he was only like 12, he had lots of abscesses and holes in his teeth upstairs that must have been painful. So it's just one of the joys of being a scientist is you find something cool, like a dead orca on the beach. You send pictures out, you learn who he was, you learn his whole story, and then you ask even more questions like, why are offshore orcas ruining their teeth by eating sharks, and how is that going to affect them in the long run? So we keep asking those questions. And let me show you over here. There's a cool jaw down here.
Oh, wow.
Too dark.
No, we can see.
This is a Baird's beaked whale. This one this is the front of the lower jaw, and the back of the lower jaw is in the back there. And that is a little dark, but you can see the orca had many, many, many teeth, even though that one, I'm sorry, is missing some. They're in a box. These Baird's beaked whales only have teeth on the bottom jaw. So, of course, they're not using these for eating. They're just using them, this is a male, for attracting a female primarily. The females have teeth too, but they tend to stay underneath the jaw and under the gums, so you don't actually see the female teeth. So that's a male Baird's beaked whale. We have another Baird's beaked whale I can show you too, but I have to roll.
Okay.
Again.
That it's so interesting when you put your hand in there because the scale suddenly really shifts on these specimens.
Oh yeah, like you can see how huge those teeth are.
Yeah.
I don't want to. Let me see. Why don't you switch off the camera? Yeah.
Just did. Yeah.
Then I'll put it down, and I will sneak.
So for those who have just joined us more recently, like Rachel and Sakshi and Isaiah, you are welcome to ask Mo questions at any point. Just leave them in the comments or chat. We'll pass them on.
So, put this guy in the.
And Mo, do you want the slide that you sent me now, or is that for later?
Yeah, let me show you what a fresh animal looks like.
Okay, here it comes.
Cameras. So that slide that you see is a very dead whale that washed up on the beach in 1925. So this carcass washed up. You can see it's kind of weird looking. Like if you saw it, you wouldn't automatically be like, oh, that's a whale.
Right.
So what happened back then in 1925 is that people were, they had their theories about this animal. So at first they thought it was a sea monster, kind of like the Loch Ness monster, or I forget, Champ from Lake Champlain in Vermont. And then another guy who it's very hard to figure out where he came from or what his training was. He went and looked at it, and his name was E.B. Wallace, I believe. And he said, oh, this is not a sea monster. This is a plesiosaur, so a dinosaur that had been frozen in the glacier, and then the glacier melted and it ended up on this beach. Well, it is none of the above. A scientist from the California Academy of Sciences went down to Santa Cruz when they heard or they saw these pictures in the newspaper, and they confirmed that no, this is actually a Baird's beaked whale. So a Baird's beaked whale is a very rare species of beaked whale. I have a model of what it would look like in real life here. They have a very prominent head with a beak, and then a pretty long, slender body. And they spend most of their time in the very deep ocean. I'm gonna put that guy down. And so they're not seen very often, which is why it was a mystery to everyone in 1925. So after the Academy confirmed that that was a Baird's beaked whale and not a plesiosaur or a sea monster, the specimen actually came here to the museum. And so I wanted to show you, let's see if I can get my light over here a little bit more.
And by confirmed that it wasn't a plesiosaur or sea monster, you really mean crushed everyone's dreams.
Yeah, exactly. Although if you search online, there are still some what's called cryptozoologists
Yeah.
who do not believe that it is a whale, and they still believe that I am hiding the Santa Cruz sea monster.
Like
right
you
here.
personally? You
Well,
personally?
since I'm in charge, yeah, I'm responsible for hiding it, right? But this is the exact specimen. So again, you're looking at the roof of the mouth, the inside of the mouth. Here's where the vertebrae attach. So we're looking up inside the Baird's beaked whale.
Wow.
From 1925 from Santa Cruz.
I mean, a very rare deep sea species of whale is so much cooler than anything else. Like, I don't know.
Exactly. I mean, I guess a plesiosaur would be kind of cool,
okay, yeah, fair point.
except if it's not real. All right, we'll keep the camera on for 1 second because we're going to walk right past somebody that I should show you. I can do it without.
I'll move it back. I'm just limiting the vertigo as you roll.
I know, I'm sorry. It's making me sick.
No, this is great.
I'm going to stop right here for this one. So this is a zebra, again, a mounted specimen that is meant to be part of a trophy collection. Mm-hmm. And this one was actually confiscated from SFO in 2019.
Oh, wow, just recently.
Yeah, and then donated here. So we don't really get that much information from them when these things happen. Right. Let me see if I need the glasses to read the label. They do sometimes know where they came from. Says country of origin, Namibia. So in some cases, people actually have the permits to hunt the animals, but then they don't have the appropriate permits to import or export them. Mm-hmm. So that could be the case here, but we don't really know. We just know that when whoever the hunter was tried to bring it in through the port of San Francisco, it was confiscated. And then instead of them destroying it, it is donated here. And if you look around the room, this is our only zebra head mount. So yeah, so that's a valuable part. And because we don't have a lot of room, the zebra is sitting on a box that stores another specimen, and those bones in there are the entire skeleton of one of the orcas that's over on the shelf. So that's rib bones here, and this is some vertebrae right there. Mm-hmm. So we have to make room where we can here.
Right, and even though the room is scarce, the room itself is still really, really great for preserving specimens, right? In terms of the environmental controls and all that's pretty special, I guess.
Right, we have to have a certain temperature control. We like to have it somewhere around 65 degrees in here, and we like it to be 50% relative humidity as well, which is kind of hard to do in San Francisco, but we try.
Yeah. Do you know, Mo, Rachel had a quick question about the Baird's whale. She was just curious, do you know whether its eyesight is poor or what its kind of adaptations for deep sea life are?
Well, I know one thing about Baird's beaked whales for deep sea diving is some researchers have studied their bones, the porousness of their rib bones, where the ribs attach to the vertebrae, because one thing that they suspect with those deep sea divers is that they can actually get the bends from going down and then going down so deep and then coming back up. And so how that manifests is in kind of pockmarked, deteriorated bone where the ribs meet the vertebrae. So researchers have studied that. I don't know a lot about their eyesight, but I assume, you know, since they're deep water animals, that they rely mostly on their echolocation to find their food. So that big bulbous head that I showed you on the model, they shoot the sounds out of, project, not shoot. They project the echo's location out of their melon, and it hits the fish. And then when it comes back in their lower jaw and then goes along the lower jaw, and the lower jaw sits right under the ear bone and is filled with a gelatinous material that conducts the sound right to their ear bones. Wow. And that's what helps them find their prey. So they're probably not using their eyesight when they're very deep underwater. All right, I'm going to try and show you these guys, but we'll see what happens with the upper. So we have some cool specimens up top here that may or may not show nicely. Let's see. We might have some issues with the light. Okay, you can see the dark colored one. So you can kind of tell by that top part. I can't point because it's about 4 feet above my head, but you can see, can you tell that those are antlers that are locked together?
Yeah.
So that's black-tailed deer, a set of black-tailed deer. And during the mating season, the male deer will fight with each other to get the female, and they fight by butting their heads together. And every once in a while, in fact, we have 3. There's that one, and then that nice bright white one that you can't really tell. And then another one on the end. You can kind of see. We have 3 sets of them here archived in the museum. So they get stuck like that, and they can't break free from each other, which then means that they can't eat. And they basically die. So like, talk about the worst death, right? You're like stuck to your mortal enemy.
Right.
And then some other guy gets the girl, right? Because you two are both stuck together.
Right. Yeah.
There have been some hunters and some game wardens. I'm going to pull this down now because my arm's getting tired. Okay. There have been some game wardens that have come across them and then help them out and anesthetize them and cut the antlers and then let them free. But that does not always happen, unfortunately.
I'm just going to drop the a really beautiful photo of the specimens you just showed into the chat.
Oh yeah, because it's a lot probably better than,
just so that people can really appreciate how.
Oops, hold on, my cords are stuck.
How these deer are just not, once you get locked in like that, you're not untangling.
You're not getting out without some help from somebody else.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sad for those guys.
Yeah.
They were just doing what they normally do. All right, so here, well, I guess whoever asked about my favorite specimen in this room is going to be this next one. Oops, I moved too far.
Oh yeah, I know that.
Little too dark.
No, we can still see it though.
Let's see if I move my light. If it helps.
Oh, great.
So this is a dugong skeleton. So dugongs are a marine mammal that are found off of India, Pakistan, Florida, Australia. They are vegetarians. So this one would be moving along the water and sucking up vegetation. And then they have a really cool adaptation that is not very obvious in this specimen. I wish I could show you, but They have something called marching molars or conveyor belt teeth, and you can look it up online to see if you can get some pictures. So crocodiles and alligators have this, and other reptiles, but the only mammals that have marching molars are elephants, dugongs, manatees, and kangaroos. And so what it means is that way back here in the back of their jaw, they have teeth that are growing in molars. All their molars are very similar shaped. And throughout their lifetime, the molars in the front get worn down when they're eating and chewing vegetation, and probably chewing a lot of sand when they do that too. So the molar in the front will get worn down and will fall out, and the ones from the back just kind of push forward. And they keep growing until they run out of tooth buds. So for elephants, that usually lasts about 80 years, and then their molars stop continuing to grow, and then at that point it becomes an issue for them. Mm-hmm. But it's very, very cool that their teeth, they're called, their teeth are just continuous, whereas like for us, a tooth falls out. If it's an adult tooth, you don't get another adult tooth. You go to the dentist and get a fake one. Right. But these guys just replace it. So this is a whole dugong skeleton. I can take this out of the way so you can see the
What
ribs.
was that? That looked quite old.
Yeah,
is it old?
That's a sign. Yeah. So the specimen itself looks really old. Like if you look at it, compared to that harbor porpoise that I showed you earlier, that was all nice and white. This one looks a lot like petrified wood. There's the flipper there. But actually, it really is bone, and it is from 1896.
Oh,
Can
wow.
you read that? Probably
we
now.
Can kind of
now
see,
the light
see
is now the light is too much.
Oh yeah, perfect.
There you go. Now you can see it. So it says Havanese for sea cow, and then it has the old scientific name, female, Sydney, Australia. And then the collectors were Lopez, or maybe that's the donor, it says, December 11th, 1893. Wow, that's what it says in the bottom. So how did we get it here? Well, back in, all right, I'm going to put the camera down now again. Okay. In 1906, when the fire happened here in San Francisco, the Academy lost everything in our collections. We don't even really know what we had prior to that time because everything burned. We assume that in birds and mammals, we had like 25,000 specimens. Now we have 100,000 birds, 32,000 mammals, and 11,000 eggs and nests in our whole collection. So in 1906, we lost everything in the fire. But in later years, other collections stopped taking care of their specimens and donated them to us here. They're called orphan collections. And so this dugong, along with a lot of other specimens upstairs, came from the Stanford collection. And Stanford at one point had their own natural history collection. But then like in the 1960s or 70s, I'm not sure exactly when, they decided they needed the space for dormitories and classrooms. And so they transferred their entire collection except for the fish. The fish went to UC Berkeley, but everything else came here to the Academy. And so that really helped to rebuild our collection. I mean, we slowly have rebuilt it over the years, but getting an orphan collection like the Stanford collection really helped to rebuild it. And it allows us to have these really old specimens that are from before the fire here in our collection.
Right. And when you say we don't even really know what we had, that's because the records would have burned as well, right? Because
back then they had paper records. Now we have electronic, which, if our computers are gone, the tapes are off site, and so the data are still in existence. So we would be able to look and see what we've lost if we had another fire.
Lucia asked, how does the dugong skeleton differ from one of a manatee?
So manatees and dugongs are very similar, and they're very closely related. So the skulls are really the primary difference in dugongs and manatees. So dugongs have more of a downward facing skull, and manatees, their faces forward a little bit more. But they both have those conveyor belt teeth. And then they both have, which is very cool, their lungs, you know, our lungs are just kind of right in the center of our chest. Their lungs kind of run along the entire back of their body, like next to their rib cage. They're kind of flattened rib cage on the top. And their lungs are really long and run along there. And that helps with their buoyancy, you know, how they're always like kind of floating around. So yeah, upstairs so cool. We have the skull and probably the skeleton of a manatee that was here in the California Academy of Sciences collection named Butterball. So Butterball was brought back from the Amazon. This is like a crazy story, but I believe that Butterball was brought back to the Academy in like 1968 or something, just on a plane. Like, the story is Butterball was in the traveling compartment with the passengers? Researchers. Yes. I don't know if that's actually true, but I just always have this cartoon image in my mind of like Butterball sitting in the airplane seat having a drink. Martini or something. Yeah. But I don't know that maybe Butterball actually was in water underneath, which would make more sense. And then Butterball lived in a tank here at the Academy until the 1980s. And one of my staff members actually remembers when she was a kid coming to the museum and like seeing Butterball floating around in the tank, and then like a head of lettuce, just because the staff would just throw lettuce in for the
we have visitors who remember that too.
That's so funny. I mean, it's crazy. So Butterball is still in the collection here, which is very cool. I didn't know that. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. Well, that is the end of my rows here. I mean, there's lots of cool bison heads and things, but I just showed you the really cool stuff.
I mean, that was excellent. I was going to ask a question from Rachel, who was curious about she asked basically how we share specimens with, or whether we share specimens with the Natural History Museum in London. And maybe that's just a good way to talk about how and when and why we do share specimens.
Right. So I like to think of myself as a librarian, but instead of taking care of books, I take care of all of these strange specimens. And so just like a library, we can loan specimens to researchers who have a specific research project. So we can send them to people. It's a little bit harder to send, especially birds and mammals, to send specimens around the world, but we can. More likely, researchers would come here and work with our specimens. So let's say someone wanted to work with Galapagos finches. Those birds do not leave the museum. They're very special, a very special part of our collection. And it's very hard to get specimens from the Galapagos nowadays.
Right.
And so researchers have to come here to work with those specimens. So we have visitors that come in. In our collection in particular, we're very open to artists coming in and working with the collection. Tons of people who've done field guides for birds and mammals have come in and used our collection. But there are lots of Bay Area artists that also just, some painters that do paintings of endangered species and need to come in and look at things, or just in general, someone was doing an image of a duck for a scientific illustration class, and so she came in and used the specimen. So right now we're not able to have visitors yet because of COVID, but that's a big part of my job when we're not in pandemic mode, is to make the collection accessible to researchers to use. And then some of our specimens do go on display. So currently on the main exhibit floor, there's an exhibit called Giants of Land and Sea, and it features a lot of our specimens. There's 6 pinniped, so seals and sea lion species found in the Bay Area. They're complete mounted skeletons, just like the dugong, hanging up of the 6 pinnipeds found in the Bay Area. There's a bottlenose dolphin. That harbor porpoise sometimes goes out with that exhibit. There's a minke whale skull and a Baird's beaked whale skull and a big blue whale that hangs all the time, but is now part of that exhibit as well. And, some whale baleen and teeth, and it's a cool exhibit. So now that we're reopened, people can come and see the museum again and see some of the specimens on display. And then the East Exhibit Hall has an exhibit called Color of Life, or Color in Nature. I forgot what it's called. Color of Life. Good, I got it right the first time. And it has a lot of there's actually a big tiger in that exhibit. Right. That was another thing that was confiscated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and was donated here. And in African Hall, we have big mounted specimens bigger than all of these. Those have been part of our collection since the 1930s when they were collected specifically for Simpson African Hall at that point. And there's a leopard in there that was confiscated in the early 2000s from the airport. So she's sitting up in a tree above all these other specimens. So birds and mammal specimens are really popular to be put on display in the museum.
For sure.
And we have a new exhibit that we're working on to open in 2022, I believe, and it's going to be all about museum collections. So we're going to be bringing all of the collections onto the main floor, and the Academy has 8 different scientific collections. So birds and mammals is kind of small. We only have 140,000 specimens, but overall the Academy has 46 million specimens. And a lot of those are plants, like you can clip off parts of plants and you have 6 specimens, or I like to say that kind of entomology has us beat, right? Because you saw that weevil part of the room, they have teeny tiny weevils and these big cases, and you pick up a handful of dirt and you get like 1,000 entomology specimens. And we go out to the beach and we have an 87-foot long blue whale, and we can't collect everything from it because it's too big. So we just collect a few small bones and try and figure out why it died, and that's all we can do. So
and for people who are interested in other subject areas you've touched on, we have on our YouTube channel a tour of the birds and mammals more traditional collections. This is again the Antler room, which is kind of a special mixed area. And then we also have the presentation you did on whale strandings in the marine mammal network, and that's really interesting. It's not great for kids, but for adults interested in that, how we respond and get information from that work. That's really, really cool.
Unless your kids really like blood. There's not that much blood, but there is blood in there. So
there's a heavy dose of
PG-13 warning.
And then I also dropped links to our Sketchfab 3D collection, which has a whole lineup of amazing skulls from Moe's collection. So that's there too. And I think the last question I wanted to ask is, actually, I'll just ask you 2 more quick ones before I let you go.
Sure.
This is another one from our classroom that's watching, and this is a great one. How does the Academy decide which specimen to keep and which parts of specimens to keep?
Yeah, so that really depends on what the animal is. So if, like yesterday, I found a gopher, small little gopher on my way into work. And so there's a specimen. So I picked up the gopher. I wrote down where I found it and when, because the 2 most important things for a specimen to make it scientifically valuable are the location and the date, because that puts that animal at that place at that time. And that's what makes, like in 100 years, someone can look at gophers around the Academy and look at the difference between the gopher in 100 years and the gopher that I picked up yesterday and put into the collection. So small animals will generally collect the whole thing. If birds hit people's windows, even though birds are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, a lot of birds, millions of birds hit windows every year in the whole United States. You can freeze it and write down, like I said, the date and the place, and then you can arrange to bring it here to us at the museum. And so whole animals. But then when it comes to something like, if the San Francisco Zoo calls me and tells me that somebody died, which does happen. So I'm trying to think of, we've had quite a few really interesting specimens from the San Francisco Zoo. The one that sticks in my brain for over the years is there was an African lion that died several years ago. And we don't have enough room in our collection for an entire lion skeleton. And we actually don't have enough room in our laboratory to clean an entire lion skeleton. So we typically just get the skulls. And the skulls can be really informative because they have all the teeth. Many animals, you can cut their tooth in half and you can count the layers of cementum and dentin. And that tells you how old the animal is. You can actually take samples of those layers and it tells you what the animal was eating while it was growing that tooth. And skulls have, you know, the brain cavity and the nasal turbinates and lots of little bones that people can collect for DNA. We always collect tissue too if we have a fresh specimen. But that particular lion, the zoo has an incinerator that they used to use. I'm not sure if they use it anymore, but the lion skull, they didn't get the message that I wanted it. And so it was waiting in the incinerator for the incinerator to get full. And I had to climb into the incinerator with the rest of the lion was in there, plus other garbage. And I had to pull the lion skull out of the incinerator. So we love to archive things in the museum to make sure that they don't have to be destroyed. And the zoo is very, very good about contacting us whenever something dies. So both us and UC Davis and the Berkeley Museum are all on the list to get specimens from the San Francisco Zoo. And then if it's a large whale on the beach, we decide, well, we almost always try to get the pelvic bones, which are, they are a residual pelvis from when whales had legs, but they actually are connected to the reproductive organs in the males, especially. And they're just kind of in the back of the whale. So and they're easy to carry off the beach because they're small. Whale skulls are just, you need big, heavy machinery to get them off the beach. So we typically cannot collect a lot from a dead whale on the beach. So we have to make the decision on the spot. You know, what do we have room for in the lab? What do we have room for in the museum? What's really important, like a sperm whale jaw. We had a sperm whale wash up several years ago in Pacifica, and the lower jaw has all the teeth, and the teeth are really important for learning how old it was and what it ate. And so we decided to take both jaws. Their jaws are fused together. So we had to carry the jaws off the beach. They were 9 feet long. They must have weighed 800 pounds. We had tarps and 18 people carrying it along the beach. You know, we'd go like 10 steps and put it down and wait, and then 10 steps and put it down. And we finally got it into the truck, and then we were driving back to the museum. And I said, what am I doing? What am I going to do with this when I get back to the museum? Because it was late at night. My whole crew I had sent home, and I was driving a truck with 800 pounds sperm whale jaws in the back. That the only place we can clean things like that is up on the roof of the museum.
Yeah.
But the elevator in the museum only goes to the second floor. It does the elevator that's big enough, the freight elevator for jaws like that. And so a couple days later, we had to hire a crew of movers early in the morning to get the bloody, stinky jaws out of the back of the truck, up the freight elevator to the second floor, and then walk along the second floor and up the stairs to the roof. They loved it. The guys, the movie guys loved it. But we left this little trail of blood all
I can't believe you didn't call me.
I know. I can't even remember what year that was. It was maybe 2018. But
Well, yeah. I mean,
sometimes I make these decisions on the beach and then I'm like, oh no, what was I thinking?
I wanted to hear a story about how you had to like spend the night in the truck because you couldn't leave it or something like that.
No. Luckily, I could park it on the loading dock, and nobody needed it. Like I had to check and make sure nobody had to drive the truck for 3 days because they stayed in the back of the truck.
Well, hot on the heels of your trick a little blood story and your climbing into an incinerator story, we've gotten a question from a couple of people who want to know, how do you become a collections manager?
I started as a curatorial assistant. I started as a biologist studying birds, and then I became a curatorial assistant here and learned all the museum stuff just on the job. There are museum studies programs at various universities. Johns Hopkins has one, USF, San Francisco State have very good museum studies programs, but there are not that many collection managers in the U.S. I mean, there aren't that many natural history museums, but I suggest volunteering at a museum if you're interested in collections and collections care, maybe going to a museum studies program. But as a museum studies student, you're going to do an internship in a museum too. But just get involved. And then I just got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, and that's how I ended up where I am.
Well, we got lucky.
But a biology background definitely helps.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again for doing this. And I should mention before I forget that viewers can tune back in at 7:00 Pacific tonight to see you again. Our night school program, the theme is the Great Gray Whale Migration. So we're going to get into gray whale science and kind of like a celebration of this 10,000-mile annual journey. So we get to get you back.
Gray whales are starting to go north. So we'll have some researchers from Mexico that study live gray whales in Mexico. And then I'm the museum perspective, and then a researcher from Washington State that studies the live gray whales in Washington. And then another researcher that's looking at their blubber and trying to figure out why they're dying. So it's going to be a really interesting evening.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay.
Well. Yeah,
I'm going to tune in as well. And the last kind of note that I'll just say is, as Moe mentioned, we are finally reopened. And so we would love to see anyone local as soon as you feel comfortable coming. And all of the information is on our website for ticket reservations and safety procedures and things like this. And also, if you are able to support the museum, we have a lot of hard work ahead of us to recover from this year of closure, and are so grateful for support of any kind. And there's a donate button on Facebook and a link in the YouTube description. So thank you. But if not, no worries. We just so appreciate you being here for programs like this. Thank you, viewers. Moe, again, thanks so much. This was so awesome. And I can't wait to twist your arm and make you come back.
I have to think about what other rooms I can show.
Flesh-eating beetles. We already decided.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah. We'll just leave the camera in there, and then that'll be it for a half hour.
Yeah,
okay.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.